The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Nations building in New York as President Lisa Williams walked into the emergency session. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with each step, the sound echoing in the unusually quiet halls. She had been president for only 2 years, but nothing in her political career had prepared her for this moment. 3 days ago, humanity had achieved its greatest technological breakthrough when Dr. Alex Carter and his team successfully tested the first faster-than-light engine. The celebration lasted exactly 18 hours before the sensors detected them. Massive ships, each one the size of Manhattan, appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. No one saw them coming. No one knew how they got there. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the large window overlooking the East River, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The 60-year-old naval commander had seen 3 wars, but his fleet of warships looked like toys compared to the alien vessels hanging in space. Above them, the USS Defiance, his flagship, was the most advanced ship humanity had ever built. Against these visitors, it seemed about as useful as a paper airplane. The alien ambassador had requested this meeting through a simple radio transmission. The voice was translated by computers, but the message was clear in any language. They wanted to talk, and they wanted to talk now. The world's leaders had 24 hours to gather, or the consequences would be severe. Dr. Carter sat at the long conference table, his laptop open to readings from every satellite and telescope pointed at the alien fleet. The numbers made no sense. Each ship generated power equal to a small star. Their hulls were made of materials that Earth's scientists couldn't identify. The technology gap wasn't just large. It was impossible to measure. Captain Maria Santos entered the room wearing her flight suit, having just returned from a reconnaissance mission. She was the best pilot in the human fleet, and her report would determine humanity's next move. Her dark eyes met Admiral Morrison's, and she shook her head slightly. The news wasn't good. The doors at the far end of the room opened, and silence fell over the assembled leaders. The alien ambassador walked in, and every human in the room took an involuntary step back. It stood 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that moved independently of each other. Its skin looked like living crystal, shifting between blue and silver as it moved. 2 large eyes, completely black, scanned the room with an intelligence that made everyone uncomfortable. Behind the ambassador came 2 guards, if that's what they were. They moved like liquid metal, their bodies changing shape slightly with each step. No one could tell if they were wearing armor or if their skin was naturally metallic. They positioned themselves at the door and became perfectly still. President Williams found her voice first. "Welcome to Earth. I'm President Williams, and these are representatives of the United Nations Defense Council." The ambassador's head tilted slightly, and when it spoke, the words seemed to come from the air itself rather than from any visible mouth. "I am Zex-Hi, voice of the Corvan Empire. Your species has developed faster than light travel. This technology brings you under Imperial law." Admiral Morrison stepped forward. "Imperial law? We weren't aware that space belonged to anyone." "The galaxy belongs to the Empire," Zex-Hi replied. "For 1,000 years, we have brought order to the stars. 217 species have joined us willingly. You will be the 218th. Dr. Carter looked up from his laptop. "Joined willingly? What does that mean exactly?" The ambassador's crystal skin shifted to a darker blue. "It means they chose submission over extinction. The Empire offers the same choice to all new species. You will serve as laborers in our expansion across the universe. Your scientists will work on projects assigned by Imperial Command. Your military will be dissolved. Your governments will be replaced by Imperial administrators." The room fell silent. President Williams felt her heart racing, but she kept her voice steady. And if we refuse, then your species will be eliminated. Every human, every city, every trace of your civilization will be removed from existence. We have the power to crack your planet in half, or simply sterilize all life from orbit. The choice is yours. Captain Santos stepped forward. How long do we have to decide? 7 of your days, Zexai answered. This is more time than most species receive. The Empire recognizes that younger civilizations sometimes need additional time to understand reality. Admiral Morrison's jaw tightened. You're talking about enslaving the entire human race. We are talking about giving your species a purpose, the ambassador replied. The Empire spans thousands of worlds. Our technology has eliminated disease, hunger, and war. Humans will live longer, healthier lives in service to something greater than themselves. Dr. Carter stood up slowly. What happened to the other species? The 217 that joined willingly? They prosper under imperial rule. Their populations are stable, their basic needs are met, and they contribute to the Empire's mission of bringing order to the galaxy. But they're not free, President Williams said. The ambassador's head tilted again. Freedom is a primitive concept. Order is what matters. The Empire has eliminated chaos from thousands of worlds. We offer the same gift to humanity. Captain. Santos had been quiet, but now she spoke up. What if we fight? The crystal skin shifted to red. Then you will die. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your ships cannot outrun ours. Your technology is approximately 1,000 years behind our own. Fighting the Empire is not war. It is suicide. Admiral. Morrison studied the alien carefully. You've done this before. Other species have tried to resist. 17 species chose to fight rather than submit, Zexai confirmed. Their worlds are now dust. Their names are forgotten. We do not enjoy destroying potential servants, but we will not tolerate defiance. The silence stretched on for long minutes. Finally, President Williams spoke. We need time to discuss this among ourselves. Of course. You have 7 days to make your decision. I will return to my ship and await your answer. The ambassador turned to leave, then paused. I should mention that your current military preparations are being monitored. Any attempt to attack our fleet will be considered an act of war and will result in immediate retaliation. The alien delegation left as quietly as they had arrived. The human leaders sat in stunned silence, the weight of the impossible choice crushing down on them. Serve as slaves or die as free beings. 7 days to decide the fate of humanity. Dr. Carter finally broke the silence. Their technology is beyond anything we can imagine. The power readings alone suggest they could destroy our entire fleet without taking damage. Numbers don't matter, Admiral Morrison said quietly. What matters is what we do with them. President Williams looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. We need to call an emergency session of the Global Council. Every head of state, every military commander, every scientist who might have ideas. We have 7 days to find a third option. Outside, the alien ships hung in space like dark clouds, waiting for humanity's answer. Below, 7 billion people went about their daily lives, unaware that their species had just been given an ultimatum that would determine whether they lived as slaves or died as free beings. The clock was ticking, and the choice seemed impossible. But somewhere in the back of every human mind, a small voice whispered the same word: no. The emergency session of the Global Defense Council lasted 18 hours without a single break. President Williams stood at the podium, her voice hoarse from speaking, but her words carried across the packed assembly hall with unwavering strength. Representatives from every nation sat in their seats, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and determination that had been building since the alien ultimatum. We have faced extinction before, she said, her hands gripping the sides of The podium. Our ancestors survived ice ages that should have killed them. They lived through plagues that wiped out half the population. They fought wars that nearly destroyed civilization itself. But they never gave up, and they never bowed down to anyone. General Paul Martinez sat in the front row, his weathered face showing no emotion as he studied the tactical reports spread. Across his tablet, the numbers were impossible to ignore. The alien fleet had enough firepower to turn Earth into molten rock in less than an hour. Every military analyst had reached the same conclusion. Conventional warfare was suicide. But Martinez had spent 40 years in the military, and he knew something that computers didn't understand. Wars weren't won by superior technology alone. They were won by the side that refused to quit. And humans had never been good at quitting got behind him. Captain Santos shifted in her seat, her pilot's instincts telling her that something was wrong with the whole situation. The aliens had overwhelming power, but they were offering terms instead of simply taking what they wanted. That suggested weakness, though she couldn't figure out what kind yet. Dr. Carter stood up when the president called his name. His report was the most detailed analysis of alien technology that humanity had managed in 5 days, and it painted a grim picture. Their ships are powered by some form of biological energy, he explained to the assembly. The hull material appears to be living tissue bonded with metal. Their weapons systems show organic components integrated with mechanical ones. What does that mean for us? Asked the representative from Brazil. It means their technology is alive, Carter replied, which might give us options we haven't considered yet. Engineer Sam Foster had been working around the clock since the aliens arrived. His team had been studying every piece of equipment on Earth, looking for anything that could be converted into weapons. The results were encouraging in an unexpected way. We can't match their technology, he told the assembly, but we can do things they won't expect. Foster pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's industrial capacity. Every mining laser can be turned into a weapon. Every construction vehicle can become a mobile gun platform. Every satellite can be rigged to explode. We don't need to match their firepower. We need to make them pay for every inch of ground they take. The representative from Japan raised his hand. You're talking about turning our entire civilization into a weapon? Yes, Foster replied without hesitation. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Dr. Rachel Torres had been quiet throughout most of the session, but when she finally spoke, her words silenced the room. I've been studying the energy signatures from their ships, she said. The biological components aren't just alive. They're in pain. The assembly hall fell silent. President Williams leaned forward. What do you mean? The energy readings show stress patterns consistent with biological torture, Torres explained. Whatever is powering their ships is suffering, constantly. I think their technology runs on the life force of other beings. General Martinez stood up slowly. Are you saying they're literally powered by slaves? I'm saying their ships might be powered by the species they've conquered, Torres replied. The 217 civilizations that joined them willingly. They might not be living peaceful lives under imperial rule. They might be fuel. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. The choice wasn't between freedom and slavery. It was between a quick death and becoming a battery for the descent. Empire's expansion across the galaxy. President Williams felt something cold settle in her stomach, but her voice remained steady. If that's true, then surrender isn't an option. We're not just fighting for our freedom. We're fighting to prevent our entire species from being turned into fuel for their war machine. Captain Santos stood up. What about the other species? The ones they've already conquered? If Torres is right, they might still be alive, Martinez said. Imprisoned, tortured, but alive. Which means they might be willing to help us if we can. Find a way to contact them. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. They weren't discussing surrender or negotiation. They were planning for a war they couldn't win against an enemy they couldn't match. And every person in the room knew it. But they also knew that the alternative was worse than death. Factory worker Ben Rodriguez spoke for the industrial unions. Every plant, every assembly line, every worker is ready to switch to military production. We might not be able to build ships like theirs, but we can build a lot of ships like ours. Scientist Helen Park represented the research community. We're already working on ways to reverse engineer their technology. We might not be able to match it, but we can learn to disrupt it. Even the children were involved. 12-year-old Tim Johnson stood up to represent the youth organizations. We want to help too. We can carry messages, help build things, and learn to fight. This is our planet too. The vote was unanimous. Not a single representative chose surrender. Not one suggested negotiation. When faced with extinction or enslavement, humanity chose a third option: defiance. President Williams addressed the assembly. One final time. We have 2 days left before the deadline. Every hour from now until then will be spent preparing for war. We're not going to match their technology. We're going to do something they've never seen before. We're going to fight. Like humans. The assembly erupted in applause, but it wasn't celebration. It was the sound of a species that had just chosen to go down fighting rather than live on their knees. Outside, the alien ships continued their silent vigil, waiting for humanity's answer. They wouldn't have to wait much longer. In factories around the world, production lines switched from civilian goods to military equipment. In laboratories, scientists worked to unlock the secrets of alien technology. In homes, families said goodbye to each other and prepared for a war that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but possibly every conquered species in the galaxy. The clock was ticking toward 0 hour, and humanity's answer was becoming clear with every passing moment. They would not submit. They would not surrender. They would fight, and if they died, they would die as free beings rather than living as fuel for an empire built on suffering. The aliens had given them 7 days to choose between submission and extinction. Humanity had made their choice in 5. Now they had 2 days to prepare for the consequences. The 7th day arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze across New York Harbor. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the sunrise paint the alien ships in shades of gold and red. In 6 hours, humanity would give their answer to the Corvan Empire. The answer had been ready for 2 days. Every human military installation on Earth had been quietly preparing for this moment. Weapons were loaded, shields were raised, and crews were at battle stations. The plan was simple. When the deadline arrived, every human ship, every defense platform, and every weapons array would fire simultaneously. Not because they expected to win, but because they needed to send a message. Captain Santos performed her final equipment check in the cockpit of her fighter. Around her, the hangar bay of the orbital station buzzed with activity as pilots prepared for what they all knew would be a suicide mission. Lieutenant Danny Cooper, barely 22 years old, gave her a thumbs up from his fighter. Major Kate Miller, the most experienced pilot after Santos, nodded grimly as she ran through her pre-flight checklist. "Remember," Santos said over the comm system, "we're not trying to destroy their fleet. We're trying to show them that humans don't surrender. Make every shot count, and make them remember that we chose to fight." On the surface, Dr. Torres made the final adjustments to her experimental weapon system. The device looked like nothing more than a large radio antenna, but it was designed to disrupt the biological components of alien technology. She had no idea if it would work, but it was humanity's best hope for leveling the playing field. Engineer Foster oversaw the conversion of the last civilian facilities. Mining equipment had been turned into artillery. Construction vehicles had become mobile weapons platforms. Even the orbital elevators had been rigged with explosives, ready to be used as massive kinetic weapons if necessary. President Williams stood in the bunker beneath the UN building, surrounded by screens showing the positions of every human military unit on Earth and in space. General Martinez stood beside her, his hand resting on the communication console that would give the order to attack. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," Martinez replied honestly. "But we're going to do it anyway." The deadline arrived at exactly noon, Eastern Standard Time. The Corvin ambassador ship approached Earth's orbital defense platform, broadcasting the expected message. "Your time is complete. What is your answer?" President Williams stepped forward to the microphone. Her voice would be broadcast to every human on Earth and to the alien fleet waiting above. "The people of Earth have considered your offer carefully. Our answer is no. We will not submit to the Empire. We will not serve as slaves. We choose to remain free, whatever the cost." The silence that followed lasted exactly 10 seconds. Then, every human weapon fired at once. The USS Defiance led the charge, its main guns blazing as it accelerated toward the nearest alien ship. Admiral Morrison stood calmly on the bridge as enemy fire began to tear through his hull. "All hands," he announced over the ship's comm system. "It has been an honor serving with you. Give them hell." The Defiance's shields collapsed under the alien barrage, but Morrison kept his ship on course. When the engines finally failed, he used the emergency thrusters to ram his flagship directly into the side of a Corvin vessel. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Captain Santos led her fighter squadron in a desperate assault on the alien fleet's flanks. Her pilots flew with a recklessness that the Corvin commanders had never seen before. Instead of trying to survive, they flew to inflict maximum damage before dying. Lieutenant Cooper's fighter exploded as it struck an alien weapon array. Major Miller's ship disappeared in a ball of fire. After taking out an enemy sensor cluster, the human assault lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the alien fleet had lost 2 ships and taken minor damage to a dozen others. The human fleet had been completely destroyed. The casualties were staggering. Every ship, every crew member, every pilot had been killed or captured. But the impossible had happened. For the first time in their 1,000-year expansion, the Corvin Empire had taken casualties from a species they were trying to conquer. The humans had actually hurt them. The retaliation was swift and devastating. Blue fire rained down from orbit, turning New York into a crater of molten glass. London disappeared in a flash of light that could be seen from space. Tokyo was vaporized so completely that nothing remained but a perfectly circular hole in the ground. The death toll reached the hundreds of millions in the first hour. But instead of surrendering, the surviving humans did something that shocked the aliens even more than their initial defiance. They kept fighting. Colonel Lisa Hayes coordinated the evacuation of major cities, but not to safety. Instead, she moved civilians to underground military installations where they could continue the resistance. "We're not running away," she told her officers. "We're repositioning for the next phase." Dr. Torres had survived the initial bombardment in her underground laboratory. Her disruption device had worked, causing several alien ships to experience system failures during the battle. Now she worked frantically to build more of them, knowing that each one might give humanity a small advantage. The alien ambassador, SciFi, landed on the ruins of New York and broadcast a message to the remaining humans. "Your defiance has cost you 3 cities and millions of lives. Surrender now, and we will spare the rest of your species." The response came from President Williams, speaking from a bunker somewhere beneath the destroyed city. "We told you our answer. It hasn't changed. Come and take what you want, but we won't give it to you. The Corvan Empire had conquered 217 species. Every single one had submitted after the first demonstration of imperial power. Humanity was supposed to be number 218. Instead, they had become something the Empire had never encountered, an enemy that chose extinction over surrender. Major Santos, now the highest-ranking pilot still alive, led a raid on a Corvan supply depot using converted civilian aircraft. Her team, including pilot Steve Walker and engineer Amy Clark, discovered something that changed everything. The alien technology was literally powered by the life force of conquered species. The ships weren't just using biological components. They were using the actual souls of living beings as fuel. Every weapon, every shield, every piece of equipment was powered by the suffering of creatures that had chosen submission over death. The Empire didn't just want slaves. They needed them to power their expansion across the galaxy. When this information reached the resistance networks, humanity's resolve hardened into something unbreakable. The choice had never been between freedom and slavery. It had been between a quick death and an eternity of torture as fuel for the Empire's war machine. Underground, in hidden bunkers and secret laboratories, the survivors prepared for the next phase of their war. They had learned the Empire's weakness. They had never faced an enemy that valued freedom more than life itself. They had never encountered a species that would rather burn their entire civilization than live as slaves. Corvan Empire controlled Earth's surface, but the planet itself had become their enemy. Every human survivor was a potential soldier. Every piece of equipment was a potential weapon. Every breath they took was an act of defiance against an empire that had never been defied. Above them, the alien ships waited for the inevitable surrender. That would never come. Below them, humanity prepared to teach the galaxy that some things were worth dying for. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the first battle, Earth had become a graveyard that refused to stay dead. The Corvan Empire controlled the surface, but every day brought new attacks from underground. Major Santos, now promoted to admiral after the deaths of her superiors, stood in the command center of New Haven Base, buried 3 miles beneath the ruins of Denver. The resistance had evolved from desperate survivors into an organized military force. What remained of humanity's government operated from hidden bunkers scattered across the planet. President Williams still led the civilian government, while General Martinez coordinated military operations from a base hidden in the Amazon rainforest. "Ghost Squadron, this is Control," Santos spoke into her headset. "You are clear for operation." Stinger. Above ground, 12 human fighters emerged from concealed launch tubes disguised as rubble. The pilots, led by Lieutenant Carl Peterson, had learned to use the alien ship's size against them. Their small fighters could dart between the massive vessels, striking at weak points and disappearing before the Empire could respond. Peterson's fighter was built from scavenged parts and alien technology. His weapons were weaker than the Empire's, but they were designed for hit-and-run tactics. He targeted the biological components that Dr. Torres had identified as critical to alien systems. "Target acquired," Peterson recorded as he lined up his shot on a Corvan supply ship. Biological conduits exposed on the port side. His missiles struck the organic power lines that fed the alien vessel's engines. The ship didn't explode, but it began to drift helplessly as its biological components died. Peterson's fighter accelerated away his enemy. Fire filled the space where he had been. The other pilots followed the same pattern. Strike fast, hit the biological systems, and escape before the enemy could retaliate. It was dangerous work, and they lost fighters on every mission. But each successful attack weakened the Empire's hold on Earth, that the human colonies on Mars and Europa had become crucial to the resistance. Commander Rita Johnson coordinated supply runs from her base in the Martian underground. The Red Planets. Natural cave systems provided perfect cover for manufacturing facilities and weapons storage. Transport 7, this is Mars Control. Johnson spoke to an approaching ship. Landing Bay 3 is clear. Watch for patrol ships on your approach. The transport carried critical supplies, raw materials for weapons, medical equipment for the wounded, and refugees from Earth's surface. But it also carried something more valuable, proof that humanity's resistance was spreading beyond Earth. Captain Nick Thompson commanded the Europa facility, hidden beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon. His team had discovered that the biological components of alien technology were vulnerable to extreme cold. They had developed freeze weapons that could disable Corvin equipment without destroying it, allowing human engineers to study and reverse engineer the technology. We've cracked another piece of their code, Thompson reported to the Resistance Network. The biological components have a weakness. They die if exposed to temperatures below -50 degrees Celsius for more than 30 seconds. This information reached Dr. Torres in her laboratory beneath the Australian outback. She had been working on a new version of her disruption device, one that could turn the aliens' own technology against them. The freeze weakness gave her the missing piece she needed. Working with computer specialist Josh Morgan, Torres developed a virus that could infect the biological components of alien technology. The virus caused the organic parts to consume themselves, creating a cascade failure that spread through connected systems. "It's ready," she told Morgan as she finished the final programming. One infected ship should spread the virus to every vessel in the fleet within hours. The virus was deployed during the next Ghost Squadron mission. Peterson's fighter carried a modified missile that released the virus when it struck an alien ship. The infection spread slowly at first, causing minor system failures. But as more ships became infected, the failures became more frequent and more severe. The Corvin fleet began experiencing critical errors at the worst possible moments. Shields failed during human attacks. Weapons misfired. Navigation systems guided ships into collision courses with each other. The Empire's technological advantage was being undermined by their own biological components. But the most important development was happening far from Earth. The Resistance had established contact with other species in the galaxy. The first message came from the Thalen homeworld, transmitted through an ancient communication array that the Empire had forgotten to monitor. Commander Sarah Brooks, leading the human communication team, decoded the message with trembling hands. "We have waited 800 years for someone to fight back." It read, "The Thalen Resistance stands ready to support your cause." Similar messages began arriving from dozens of worlds. The Zerani, conquered 5 centuries ago, had maintained a secret resistance movement. The Vorthan Empire, absorbed by the Corvins 300 years earlier, still had hidden military assets. The Zillan Federation, one of the first species to fall to the Empire, had been planning rebellion for nearly 1,000 years. The galaxy was full of conquered species that had never truly submitted. They had been waiting for someone to prove that the Corvin Empire could be beaten. Humanity's defiance had given them hope for the first time in generations. The information exchange was invaluable. The Thalen Resistance provided details about Corvin military strategies. The Zerani shared technical specifications for alien weapons. The Vorthan survivors revealed the locations of secret Empire facilities. The Yellen Federation offered to coordinate simultaneous uprisings across multiple worlds. For the first time in their history, the Corvin Empire faced internal dissent. Species that had been model subjects for centuries suddenly began sabotaging Imperial facilities. Slave workers destroyed equipment. Administrators found their computers infected with mysterious viruses. Military units reported equipment failures and communication breakdowns. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. They began executing entire populations as examples to others. Worlds that showed signs of rebellion were sterilized from orbit. But instead of stopping the resistance, the harsh crackdowns only made it stronger. The alien leadership, meeting an emergency session aboard their flagship, struggled to understand what was happening. Fleet Admiral Vexstar, the Empire's most experienced commander, argued for the complete destruction of humanity as an example to other species. "The humans are a cancer," he declared. "They spread their defiance like a disease. We must cut them out before they infect the entire galaxy." But other leaders disagreed. Sub-Commander Claith pointed out that destroying entire civilizations would only create more rebels. "We rule through fear," she argued, "but if we become too feared, we will face rebellion everywhere." The debate paralyzed the Empire's response. They had never faced a situation where their standard tactics had failed so completely. Every action they took seemed to create more problems. Mercy was seen as weakness. Brutality created martyrs. The empire that had conquered the galaxy through overwhelming force found itself unable to deal with an enemy that refused to be overwhelmed. Meanwhile, the resistance grew stronger. Admiral Santos coordinated attacks with rebel forces on 12 different worlds. The Ghost Squadron expanded from 12 fighters to over 100. The freeze weapons developed on Europa were being manufactured in secret facilities across the galaxy. The virus created by Dr. Torres had spread through half. The Empire's fleet. Corvan ships were experiencing system failures at critical moments. Their biological technology, once their greatest strength, had become a liability that human ingenuity could exploit. President Williams addressed the resistance networks from her bunker. "We have shown the galaxy that the Empire can be fought. Now we must show them that it can be beaten." The fire of human defiance has spread to every corner of the galaxy. The Empire's 1,000-year reign is coming to an end. The response came from dozens of worlds. Alien voices speaking in different languages, but all saying the same thing: we are ready to fight. The Corvan Empire had created their own enemy. By trying to make humanity submit, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the galaxy for 1,000 years. The desire for freedom was not unique to humans. It existed in every intelligent species. The Empire had simply been successful in suppressing it until now, but humanity had shown that the Empire could bleed. They had proven that the impossible was possible. The galaxy was full of species that had been waiting for someone to light the fire of rebellion. Humanity had provided the spark. Now the fire was spreading from world to world, and nothing the Empire could do would stop it. 3 years after the first ultimatum, the Corvan Empire was fighting rebellions on over 300 worlds. Admiral Ellen Davis stood on the bridge of the USS Retribution, watching the combined fleet of humanity and their alien allies prepare for the final assault on the Empire's home system. The Retribution had been built from the wreckage of destroyed Corvan vessels, powered by hybrid human-alien technology, and crewed by beings from dozens of different species. Humans worked alongside Thalen engineers, Zerani weapons specialists, and Vorthan navigators. The ship was a symbol of everything the Empire had tried to prevent: free beings working together by choice rather than force. "Status report," Davis called to her bridge crew. Commander Rob Martinez, Sam Foster's nephew, managed the ship's hybrid. "Systems. All systems green, Admiral. The biological components are stable, and the virus countermeasures are online." The virus created by Dr. Torres had spread through most of the Empire's fleet, but the Corvans had developed partial immunity. The resistance had been forced to constantly evolve their tactics, creating new versions of the virus faster than the Empire could develop defenses. Captain Sarah Brooks, now leading the communication division, coordinated with the rebel fleets from other worlds. "Thalen fleet reports ready. Zerani squadron is in position. The Vorthan survivors are standing by for the signal." The plan was massive in scope. While the combined fleet attacked the Empire's home system, resistance forces across the galaxy would strike at every major Imperial facility simultaneously. The Empire's strength had always been its ability to concentrate overwhelming force. The rebellion would deny them that advantage by forcing them to fight everywhere at once. On Earth, the resistance had evolved from underground fighters to a planetary defense force. General Susan Parker, who had taken over after Martinez's death, in a suicide attack, coordinated with alien freedom fighters to establish safe zones for refugees from across the galaxy. Refugee Transport 17, this is Earth Control. Parker spoke to an approaching ship. You are cleared for landing in Zone 7. Medical teams are standing by. The transport carried survivors from the Corvin homeworld itself. The Empire had begun destroying its own colonies rather than lose them to the rebellion. Entire civilizations were being wiped out to prevent them from joining the resistance. But the Empire's brutality had backfired. Instead of terrifying other species into submission, it had shown them that the Empire was desperate. The 1,000-year reign of terror was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Dr. Torres, now leading the Resistance's science division, had made another breakthrough. Working with alien scientists, she had discovered that the biological components of Corvin technology were not just alive, they were sentient. The Empire had been torturing intelligent beings to power their expansion. The implications are staggering, she explained to the Resistance leadership. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of equipment is powered by the suffering of conscious minds. The Empire isn't just evil, it's literally fueled by evil. This revelation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been reluctant to rebel now understood that they were fighting to free not just themselves, but the billions of minds trapped in the Empire's technology. The war had become a mission of liberation on a scale never before imagined. Final battle began with a coordinated assault on the Empire's home system. The combined fleet, led by Admiral Davis, faced the largest concentration of Corvin ships in the galaxy. The enemy fleet was massive, but it was also infected with the virus that had been spreading for 3 years. All ships, this is Admiral Davis, she announced to the fleet. Today we end 1,000 years of tyranny. Today we free the galaxy. All units advance. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Ships from dozens of worlds fought side by side against an enemy that had once seemed invincible. Human fighters flew alongside alien vessels, their tactics coordinated by beings who had learned to trust each other through shared suffering. Admiral Santos, now commanding the Earth Defense Fleet, led the assault on the Empire's flagship. Her pilots, including the legendary Carl Peterson, had developed kamikaze tactics that turned single fighters into ship killers. They flew directly into the biological components of alien vessels, their explosions disrupting the torture systems that powered the Empire's technology. This is for every mind you've enslaved, Peterson transmitted as he guided his fighter into the heart of the enemy flagship. His explosion triggered a cascade failure that spread through the ship's biological systems, freeing thousands of trapped consciousness that had been used as living batteries. The liberation of the trapped minds had an immediate effect on the Empire's technology. Ships that had been powered by suffering suddenly lost their energy source. Weapons that had been fueled by pain stopped working. The Empire's greatest strength became their greatest weakness as their own technology turned against them. The Corvin Emperor Zexhi's superior made a desperate final gambit. If they couldn't rule the galaxy, they would destroy it. Imperial ships began targeting inhabited worlds, not for conquest, but for annihilation. The empire that had once sought to bring order to the stars now sought to burn everything rather than see it free. They're targeting civilian populations, reported Captain Brooks. 43 worlds under bombardment. estimated casualties in the billions. This was the Empire's final test of galactic resolve. Would the rebellion sacrifice innocent lives to win the war? Would they allow entire civilizations to be destroyed rather than surrender? The answer came from every rebel fleet simultaneously. They would not trade lives for victory. Every available ship was diverted to protect the targeted worlds. The rebellion split their forces, weakening their attack on the Empire's home system, but saving countless lives. Admiral Davis made the crucial decision. All ships, priority override. Protect the civilian targets. We'll accept any casualties necessary to save innocent lives. The battle became a race against time. Rebel forces rushed to defend populated worlds while the Empire's remaining ships tried to destroy as many as possible. The rebels arrived at most worlds just in time, their shields absorbing the killing blow meant for billions of innocent beings. The final confrontation took place above the Corvin homeworld. The Empire's last ship, commanded by Zexhai himself, faced the combined fleet of free beings. The alien ambassador, who had once offered humanity the choice between submission and extinction, now faced the consequences of that ultimatum. "You have doomed the galaxy," Zexhai transmitted to the rebel fleet. "Without the Empire's order, chaos will consume everything. You will destroy yourselves within a generation." Admiral Davis responded personally. "We would rather face uncertainty as free beings than certainty as slaves. The galaxy will find its own path without your guidance." The final battle was brief but decisive. The Empire's last ship, powered by the suffering of trillions of enslaved minds, fell to the combined fire of beings who had chosen freedom over safety. When the ship exploded, the psychic scream of liberated consciousness echoed across the galaxy. The Corvin Empire was finished. Their 1,000-year reign of terror was over. But the victory had come at a tremendous cost. Hundreds of worlds had been destroyed. Billions of beings had died. Entire civilizations had been wiped out rather than liberated. In the aftermath, the survivors faced a choice that would define the galaxy's future. They could try to rebuild the Empire under new leadership, or they could try something that had never been attempted on such a scale: a voluntary confederation of free worlds. President Williams, now leading the transitional government, addressed the galaxy from the restored Earth. "We have shown that freedom is possible. Now we must show that freedom is sustainable. The Galactic Confederation will be based on choice, not force. On cooperation, not domination. On hope, not fear." The response was overwhelming. Species that had been enemies for centuries chose to work together. Worlds that had been isolated for millennia opened their borders to trade and communication. The galaxy that had been united by fear began to unite by choice. The Confederation's first act was to establish the Memorial of the Enslaved, a monument to the trillions of minds that had been tortured to power the Empire's expansion. The biological components of captured Corvin technology were given proper burial. Their suffering finally ended. Admiral Davis, now serving as the Confederation's first military coordinator, established the principle that would guide the new galaxy. Never again will intelligent beings be enslaved. Never again will freedom be sacrificed for order. Never again will a galaxy bow to tyranny. The Corvin Empire had learned too late that there are some forces in the universe that cannot be conquered. They had discovered that when you threaten beings with extinction, some of them don't calculate odds. They load their weapons and ask where you want to start. Humanity had not just saved themselves. They had saved the galaxy. But more importantly, they had shown every intelligent species that freedom was worth fighting for, worth dying for, and worth living for. The fire of human defiance had spread to every corner of the galaxy, and it would never be extinguished again.